Welcome to this author's interview series. My name is Christina Theodoraki. I'm editor of Small Business Economics and Entrepreneurship Journal, and I have the great honor to interview today two very important scholars, Goran Calic from McMaster University and Moren Lévesque from York University. Welcome, Goran. Welcome, Moren. Thank you for accepting to participate to this interview series and for sharing your knowledge with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us.
Yes, of course.
So Goran and Moren are going to give us more insight on the recently published paper entitled on why women-owned businesses take more time to secure microloans. This paper has been published in Small Business Economics in December 2023, and this paper has a third co-author, Anton Shevchenko from Concordia University. So I would like to start my first question. Could you please tell us briefly what is this paper about?
Yes, so very briefly, it's about the differences in time that it takes women-owned businesses and men-owned businesses to raise money for their startups. And of course, also we explore the reasons for these differences in time it takes them to raise money.
Yes, I can also add that a little bit more detail, if you will, that what we argue is the following. So first, let me say that in entrepreneurship, there is not that much work, or not enough, I would say, on time. And that basically this piece is really focusing on time as an outcome. And if we look at the literature that focus on the type of work we're doing, it majorly, rather than considering time as the outcome, it looks basically at the amount of money between men and women. And so we thought it would be interesting to bring something where the focus as an outcome is actually the time.
Excellent. Can you tell me why this paper is special, why this paper, this article is important, and what we learn from this article that we didn't know before?
Yeah, sure. So waiting for funding has really important financial and managerial implications. So as Moren said, the time it takes to raise the money. So it's not just about the time, it's not about the money itself, but the time it takes to get that money. So the longer you wait for funding, it means you have to look for sources of money somewhere else. So the business doesn't stop spending money. You need to keep paying employees. You need to keep the business alive. If you're waiting for money, you're looking for it somewhere else. So the time it takes to get it is important. Waiting longer for funding can also mean you miss some business opportunities that are time sensitive. So our students talk about first mover advantages all the time, and they're important in some industries. And you don't get a first mover advantage if somebody raises money before you do. So to give you a bit more information about the paper too, is we find that it takes women longer than it takes men to get the same amount of money. And we find this on kiva.org, which is a crowdfunding platform where businesses can go and raise money for their startups. And we find this difference between women and men-owned businesses exists for three important reasons. And two of these reasons are the choices the entrepreneurs make, and one of them is a choice the lender makes. So we make that important distinction that part of this is the choice the entrepreneur makes. And we find that women choose bigger loans, and we find that women ask for more time to pay back these loans. Now, as you can imagine, lenders prefer to give out smaller loans, and they prefer to get their money back sooner. And these are two reasons why it takes women more time to raise the same funding that it would take a man-owned business. And we also find that aside from these choices, lenders prefer lending to men-owned businesses. We don't exactly know why this is, but we speculate it's a bias, which is that entrepreneurship is a male-dominated profession, and most lenders believe that men will outperform women in entrepreneurship, and therefore they believe it's less risky or a better choice to give money to male-owned businesses. So we find these three reasons are important, and we find two of them are the choices that borrowers make, and one of them is the choice that lenders make based on their preference who to lend to.
Goran, give you an awesome answer. It gets difficult for me to add to this, but maybe a point I will make, and it might not exactly address the question, but I think you may not ask the question, so I can say it, that there is something important in this research. Is Goran mentioned Kiva, and when we were looking at other scholars who have worked with Kiva, who have done work on microloans, what we notice is that they were not taking into consideration the fact that some of the loans are personal and some are business loan. And the fact that we really separated, we didn't look at the personal loan, but focus on the business loan. And for the woman, there was a large percentage of them that were actually using Kiva for personal loan. And so the fact that we could separate business from personal was also something that we thought would bring something new to the field and to the research that has already used Kiva and looked at microloan, crowd lending, I should say.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Moren. I want to add a little bit to that. So when you look at Kiva data holistically, you find that a lot of lending actually happens to women. And I think the assumption would be, okay, women are borrowing a lot of money and they're using it to raise, to start a business. Well, it turns out a lot of that lending is for personal uses, like taking care of the family, paying off family debt, buying food, financing special occasions like weddings. So about 3/4 of that lending is for personal use. So even though women do a lot of the borrowing in Kiva, a lot of that borrowing isn't for businesses. So it was really important for us, and I think it's important maybe for the listener to really split up what we're looking at, because if we take a look at just the personal loans, the decision probably the outcomes would have been different. So I think it's just important to highlight that. Thanks, Moren. That's a good point.
This is extremely interesting, and I am hearing you, and I found more and more interesting also this paper and its contribution more impactful. As you were saying, it's extremely interesting the focus we have with the time, and we're considering that time has an impact in opportunity identification and exploitation, how we identify and exploit ideas to turn to business. When we take too long, probably the idea will be exploited by another. But also you raised this important to the funding, how you can find funding, and also how you link it to the gender difficulties that may have. But also this separation between the business and the personal loans, how we can find more information. So it's very original and very interesting, this contribution. And I would like to take you back to this first moment, the Eureka moment, that you start thinking about this project. How this idea came from? How this focus came up to write this paper?
Yep. So it's interesting. When we first started talking about this, the idea wasn't necessarily, let's just look at gender. The idea was there's all this lending happening online. Crowdfunding has democratized who can get funding. Because if you imagine, there could be a borrower in Kenya and a lender in Canada, and as long as they both have access to the internet, one can fund the other. And a lot of these loans, because they are going to developing countries, are not that large. So if you have $50 to lend, that's enough. So these borrowers no longer have to, have access to like angels or venture capitalists. So there's this huge level of access. And so that's really interesting. This is one starting point. The other starting point is that a lot of this lending now happens to female entrepreneurs. And we know that in developing countries, a great proportion of entrepreneurship, more than what in developed countries, is by women. And part of the reason for this is that there's less access to traditional jobs. So women do their best to contribute to their families, and they do this by starting poultry farms, mushroom farms, anything they can to start their own business and contribute to society in some way. So we have this context of lots and lots of lending happening, and we have this context too where women are a big part of it. Men too, but women are a big part of it. And Moren has done this great research. She has a special issue in ETP on the importance of time as an outcome. So these three things together kind of coalesced in I would say our mind as authors, and how we can explore time in this context. And I'm not sure how familiar your readers are with this, but risk really matters. So when you make time-based decisions, your appetite for risk matters. The longer you choose to wait for a loan, or the less time you choose to wait for a loan, the bigger the loan, the small. These are all risk-based decisions. And we know from other research that women and men make different investment decisions when it comes to personal investments. So there's a lot of research looking at personal investments, diversification of portfolios, and these differences between men and women. So we know there's some risk preference differences between the two genders. And so we thought, well, what if we applied this as an independent variable in our study on lending on Kiva, which looked at time as an outcome. And we did this expecting that women would take less risk than men would. And part of taking less risk in this context, which is something we had a long discussion with reviewers about, was that actually take a bigger loan. So when you want to reduce your risk, you take a bigger loan. And the reason is you have more runway, you have more slack. And if things go wrong, you have some cushion to rely on. It also means you ask for more time to pay this loan back. Not just this loan, but any size loan. So same loan between men and women will ask for more time to pay it back. So these are decisions where women are reducing their risk relative to men. So this was great for our context because we're now looking at a very clean separation between two groups of individuals who are making different risk preferences, and therefore making different decisions about loans. And all of a sudden, you have a very nice, clean, dependent variable, and you can see the outcomes that it has on the outcome, which is time. And just to be clear, we don't make any kind of value judgment. We don't know whether choosing bigger loans and more time to pay it back is better or worse. We just know it has an impact on the amount of time it takes to get that loan. So it was, I guess, this combination of context, Moren's previous work, and the existing theoretical work around risk preference differences between men and women that allowed us to kind of think about the study the way that we did, and then eventually to conduct it.
Very nice, Goran. So if I may, I'm gonna add something a little bit more fun, at least based on what I remember. So
that was fun, Moren. Don't say it wasn't fun.
Yeah. So we were so Anton Shevchenko, who is also an author on the paper, was my doctoral student at York University. And he had met Goran at, I guess it was a workshop for a special issue of the Journal of Management Studies. And so both young men met there, had each a great paper that ended up being published, which is very good. And then Anton introduced me. We were all at the academy, and Anton was so kind to introduce me to Goran. And so I was there, kind of remember, sitting at a table at a bar during the academy, which is common to many of us. We each had either a beer or a glass of wine, and we started to think about what can we do together that would be fun. And Goran had been working on crowdfunding. And I think with Anton, if I recall, they had done some work before. And so that's why I said, well, I just did this thing on time. And so we, more wine, more beer, but not too much, just enough to get creative, and started to draw and think about this paper. And it was a long journey, as it is with many papers, but I was just refreshing my memory, and I was reading it yesterday. And I must say, I need to say that Goran is an awesome writer. It is really well written. It's an easy read, and he is a first author. He gets the credit for being such a great author. So I encourage you, listener, to take the time to read the paper. It's really, really well written, and this is all thanks to Goran. I'm going to stop here. Sorry. A little plug.
We can do more papers together.
I hope so, Goran.
I mean, we do have more papers together, so we are,
This is excellent. I'm so excited to hear also, and I would like also to encourage, because this is extremely also important to highlight how collaboration and co-authorship, it's a hard also process, it's a journey. And we see that we create new inventions that become products and articles, final articles, and we continue to advance the research discussion. But actually it takes time. Sometimes we engage in a long or difficult sometimes review process. So it's extremely interesting to engage more, because this is how research advances what we learn. I would like to thank you both and encourage also the readers to read and download the paper. For me, I would like to I highly appreciated the honest and humble response of Goran. Indicated that even through the study, we don't know actually yet whether we take bigger loans, that will be an insurance that we will get the funding. So it's extremely interesting, and this gives me the floor to ask the next question, turning to the future. How, based on this first to this article, how you will continue to advance the research discussion? How do you see that will be the future on the next papers? How this topic is going forward? What new ideas could probably propose to encourage authors to continue to dig and explore? Or probably, if you have, as you were saying, the other papers with Moren, probably you can share some orientation and advice for the readers and other authors, or you.
Yeah, this is a good question. So my first thought when you said that was that, so try and replicate our results. I would encourage all listeners to, this is public data, so kiva.org data is made public. You should try and replicate these results. I think we were very clear in the methods of the data that we used. But looking at things that we couldn't do in this paper that I think would be interesting as well, assuming this work replicates, which we expect that it does. It's a huge amount of data, and the results are pretty conclusive. We don't explore mixed gender teams, so there is work around the effectiveness of mixed gender teams, and that it's potentially positive. Now, we don't know that in this context. And it'd be interesting to see whether gender mixed teams make decisions that are like somewhere in between, or a combination of what, let's say, a women only led or a man only led team would make. So in this case, where men take more risks, they try and get the loans quicker and then try and pay them back sooner. Again, we don't know which of these is better, and we assume it depends on the context. Sometimes one is better, sometimes the other is better. But it'd be interesting to see whether gender mixed teams make some combination of these decisions, or perhaps gender mixed teams are more flexible in switching to one type of strategy versus the other. So maybe taking more risks sometimes, taking less risks sometimes, or maybe there's some kind of mediator or a moderator or interaction where in this context they're more flexible, in this context they're less flexible. So I think this will be really interesting. We also don't explore what happens after the loan is acquired. So we don't know on average under what conditions one decision is superior to the next. So I think it'd be very interesting to look at the entrepreneur post-crowdfunding for as long as it's feasible. And in fact, that is a good segue to another piece of work that Moren, Anton, and I are doing, which is looking at environmental projects post-crowdfunding. So it is a different type of social entrepreneurship. And in this case, we look at we know that environmental projects do get funding on crowdfunding, are more likely to get crowdfunding than non-environmental projects. So we know that happens. And what we don't know is, does this translate to success post-crowdfunding? I think the underlying assumption is, of course it does, you get more money, but that doesn't have to be the case. It could be that people on crowdfunding love environmental projects to the extent that they fund bad projects, and then these projects fail. And it could also be that there's other factors beyond money that help projects succeed. So we also look at failed projects and look at, do the failed projects do well post-crowdfunding? And we do this by looking at the financial effects of getting more money, so the financial effects of crowdfunding, and the money effects. And we look at the social effects of crowdfunding, which is garnering an audience, future potential clients, mobilizing a movement, and does this have an effect post-crowdfunding? So I'm not going to spoil the results of this paper, but it is another piece of very interesting work currently, ready for publication somewhere.
I was trying to hear more about this new results that are very it's ongoing also, and they have not been published. But we are very much looking forward that you publish this paper too, and we
Stay posted.
We will shoot publications, and we look also forward to read this paper. I don't know if Moren, you want to add something on this question?
No, I think Goran did a great job here. Unless you want to hear more, where I've been looking at into the future, because I'm starting. So maybe I'll just say one thing. So what has been and is becoming when I put my editor hat on, because I'm an editor at Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice. They haven't asked me yet at Small Business Economics. Maybe they'll come one day now that I have a few publications there. You never know.
Of course, we'll be more than happy.
We say if you don't ask, you don't get, right? So, but I have co-authors actually who are editor there. And actually with that co-author, and there's other things happening, but I see a lot of papers that comes my way again because of an editorial that I worked on with colleagues for ATP, where they use artificial intelligence-based tools. And so this is, I think, something that, and again, perhaps Goran and I can think about either that can be possible to play with some of these tools as we look at these huge databases like on Kiva or other crowdfunding or crowd lending platform. But there is more coming, and there will be more coming. And I think that will be very exciting to see what comes about. But there is always a but. There will be many issues that we'll have to think about. Biases, for example, is one of the big ones when we use these tools, especially if you use those where the machine learning, for example, is learning from part of your sample. So I think this will be very exciting in the future. And I have a new PhD student who is learning machine learning and using all of this. So Goran, our next project, I could bring my PhD student, Pierre, because he is getting very good on this. And so see, there is a lot for us to do. So don't give up on me, Goran, okay? I'm still in academia for a few more years. Okay, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Definitely. When you find the right co-authors, like keep it going. But actually, Moren, you raised on a very important topic, and from the editorial point of view, I think it's extremely important also to stress that we are quite interested in new methods, but you also needed to be aware of all the risks that these new methods also raise. And the machine learning, it's extremely important to see and understand how this methodology advances, or what are the biases that are related, or even the errors that may introduce researchers in taking some shortcutting sometimes. So I think it's extremely important to use it with precaution, and also continue to understanding how these methods could advance the learning, but also be aware of any errors they may have. Going to my last question. So I would be extremely interested. So during this interview, you have been raising some advices, but I would like to formulate as a question, and give you the floor to talk about how your findings could be applied. What will be your advices to practitioners, whether to entrepreneurs or even investors and funders? I hear Goran say, we don't know, ask for more money or more bigger amounts of money. It will probably lead to acceptance. So what would be probably your advices based on this study and these results, or the precaution also how to implement the results of this article?
Yeah. So there are some practical insights that I think are really impactful. And when Moren and I and Anton read a study, I think top of mind is always, is this useful? And this certainly is useful. And there's a couple of reasons for this. So just to go on a little bit of a tangent, when we think about professional entrepreneurs, they often, most of the time, know a lot about what they're doing. They consider time-based decisions. They consider the time impact of their decisions. They consider the financial impact of their decisions. They're very sophisticated. And this is the result of working with venture capitalists, or being serial entrepreneurs, or being well-educated, or being experienced, and so on. What crowdfunding has done, and this is everywhere, is it's opened entrepreneurship to hobbyists and amateur entrepreneurs. And this started with the financial crisis of 2007, when a lot of people lost jobs, they couldn't get lending, and they went online. And this has allowed us, one, to get a lot of data on how entrepreneurship happens, who fails and who doesn't, because we do see this on crowdfunding. We do see the failures. There's very little left truncation. But it also gives us the opportunity to create insight and build a training for entrepreneurs. And what do I mean by this? So when most people go on a crowdfunding platform, they really largely think about the amount of money they're raising. I mean, this is one of the lines you put in. This is kind of what's measured, is how much money have I raised. It is also a very important consideration, and sometimes maybe even more important, when you get that money. So how quickly you can raise it. And when starting a business, these are two things that every entrepreneur should have front of mind. So I think one thing our study does is, one, it highlights the importance of the time to get funding. And it also highlights that this is dependent on other decisions the entrepreneur makes. So if you really do want that big loan, you need to be aware of the fact that it's just going to take you more time. If you want more time to pay back your loan, it's going to take you more time to raise that loan. So I think there is an opportunity for education, and an opportunity for microfinance institutions, particularly those working with inexperienced entrepreneurs or first-time entrepreneurs, to be very clear to them about how their risk preferences and choices will affect outcomes, not just in the amount of money they raise, but also in when they raise that money, so how long it takes to reach that funding goal. I think this is probably the key practical implication. I mean, I can go on, there are others, but I think this is the really important one.
Yeah, I can add just one that we highlight in the paper that I thought is a good one, and I think Goran mentioned more of a bigger picture or implication to practitioners and entrepreneurs from what we're doing. But perhaps one that is more specific to the research is the fact that the men-owned businesses may be able to take advantage, may have, let me say it differently, may have more advantages in industry where you have to move fast. And the reason is that because they ask for less money, it takes them less time to get that money. Whereas for woman-owned businesses, then maybe they will do better in industries where you actually do need more money, even though it's at the cost of taking longer. So I think that's something that, at least when I bring some of my research in the classroom, this is one of the findings that I really like to bring to the classroom, because it's very tangible, and I think it's also a very important one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. I really enjoyed the discussion, and I'm sure that our readers, also listeners, they will definitely enjoy the paper. I would like to join our readers and encourage them to download the paper from which is available in the Springer's website in Small Business Economics, and also continue this discussion on this important topic. Thank you both very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.